A Treatise of Satan's Temptations. By Richard Gilpin. A Discourse of the Malice, Power, Cruelty and Diligence of Satan. First part of Chapter 4. That Satan hath a great measure of knowledge, proved by comparing him with the knowledge of Adam in innocency, and by his titles. Of his knowledge, natural, experimental, and accessory. Of his knowledge of our thoughts. How far he doth not know them, and how far he doth, and by what means. Of his knowledge of things future, and by what ways he doth conjecture them. The advantages in point of temptation that he hath by his knowledge. In the discovery of Satan's knowledge, I shall first give evidence and demonstration thereof. To which purpose. 1. Let us consider the knowledge of Adam in innocency, which being found to be great, it will thence be easily concluded that Satan's knowledge is far greater. Two notable discoveries we have of Adam's knowledge. The one was his giving of names to all creatures, Genesis 2:29, which was not only a sign of his dominion, but also a notable instance of his understanding, seeing the names were given according to the natures of creatures, whereof Bochardus gives a large account, as the camel is called, because it is apt to repay injuries. The kite, from its sharpness of sight, the pelican is named from its usual vomiting, etc. The consideration of the aptness of names imposed on creatures, made Plato acknowledge that it was a work above ordinary capacity. The other discovery of Adam's knowledge was his knowledge of the original of Eve. At first sight, Genesis 2:23, he said, "This is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh," etc. This instance Luther made use of to prove the knowledge that we shall have of one another in heaven, which shows that Adam's understanding was then incomparably more sublime than ours, and of a nearer approach to the knowledge, which a state of glory shall furnish us withal. To this might be added a further proof from the rare inventions and excellent discoveries, that some raised wits have made, of things that have laid deep and far out of the view of common capacities. As also those views, sights, and more than ordinary comprehensions which the souls of men have had, when they were a little freed from the clog, and hindrance of the body, either in ecstasies, or by approaching death, all which put together, will go far to prove a very great measure of knowledge in Satan, if we take along with us this foundation, that in all the works of God, we find the highest knowledge in the noblest being. Living creatures are more excellent than stones or trees, and therefore hath God furnished them with senses, and hath also distinguished them by higher degrees of sagacity, according to their excellency above others. Thus the ape, fox, elephant, etc., have such abilities above the worm and fly, that some have questioned whether they had not some lower degrees of reason. Yet as these are below man, so doth his reason far excel their greatest quickness of sense. Angels are a higher being than man, for he made him lower than the angels, and consequently their knowledge is proportionably greater. So that if Adam in innocency understood the nature of things, how much more exactly and fully must we imagine Satan to know them. 2. Secondly, but the proof is more full and direct, from those appellations and titles which the Scripture and the experience of men have put upon him, his usual name, Delta Alpha Mu Omega Nu, Quasi Delta Alpha Mu Omega Nu, which, in Matthew 8:31, Mark v:12, Revelation 16:14. We translate devil, properly signifieth one that is wise, knowing, or skillful. And however the wickedness of that spirit hath so far dishonored this word, that it is always, as some think, used to signify unclean spirits. Yet still it carries an evidence of their nature in reference to knowledge, that though they are wicked creatures, yet are they wise and knowing. It is said, Genesis 2:1, the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which, though it be true literally of the serpent, whose wisdom and subtlety naturalists have abundantly noted, yet that expression hath an eye upon Satan who is the principal agent, and the serpent there is called subtle, as influenced by Satan, whose instrument he was, which we may believe, not only upon the credit of Austin and Lyra, but more securely upon the testimony of other scriptures, which name him the old serpent, Revelation 17:9, and impute all that craft in the management of the temptation to a particular remarkable skill and subtlety of Satan. The serpent beguiled Eve, through subtlety, 2 Corinthians 11:3. And, if basic conjecture right, the appellation, Delta Alpha Mu Omega Nu do so fitly suit this history of the tree of knowledge, that the title of knowledge seems to be given him for this singular masterpiece of craft. 3. Thirdly, that Satan hath great knowledge is by these arguments discovered, but if further inquiry be made into the nature of his knowledge, we shall be nearer to a satisfaction in this particular, and here we may observe a threefold knowledge in Satan. 1. First, a natural knowledge, which the schoolmen have distinguished into these two. 1. An evening knowledge, which he received from things created, whereby the species of things were impressed upon his mind, and so received, being a knowledge a posteriori, from the effects of things, which, because it is more dark and obscure than that which ariseth from the causes of things, they termed evening knowledge. 2. The other is morning knowledge, which is a knowledge of things in the power and wisdom of God, in which he saw the ideas and images of all things. This knowledge they prefer before the other, as lines and figures are better known from mathematical instruction than by their bare tracts written in dust. 2. Secondly, besides this he hath an experimental knowledge, which is the improvement of that natural stock, by further acquisitions and attainments. And indeed Satan had very high advantages for an increase of knowledge. He had a great stock to begin withal, he hath had fit and suitable objects to work upon in his contemplations, so that by comparing things with things in so large a field of variety, and that for so many years together, it cannot be but that he should be grown more experienced and subtle than he was at first, and the Scripture doth fairly countenance this supposition, by telling us of his devices, 2 Corinthians 2:11, of his wiles, Ephesians 5:11, and of his depths, Revelation 2:24. All which phrases, imply that Satan hath so studied the point of temptation, that he hath now, from long experience and observation, digested it into an art and method, and that with such exactness, that it has become a mystery and a depth, much covered and concealed, from the notice and observation of men. 3. Thirdly, to both the former may be added another knowledge, which because it is from another spring, I may call it an accessory knowledge, consisting in occasional discoveries made to him, either when God is pleased to make known so much of his mind and purpose, as he employs him, as an instrument or servant, to execute, as he did in the case of Job and Ahab. Or when he informs himself from the Scriptures, or catcheth hints of knowledge from the Church and the ordinances thereof. If good angels have an increase of knowledge this way, as is evident they have, for to principalities and powers in heavenly places is made known by the Church the manifold wisdom of God, Ephesians 3:10, we cannot but imagine that Satan hath some addition of knowledge, from such discoveries. While we are upon this point, it will be necessary to offer some satisfaction to 2 questions. Question 1. First, whether Satan knows our thoughts? Answer 1. It is undoubtedly God's prerogative to know the thoughts. He knows them intuitively, which is beyond the power of any creature, Jeremiah 17:9, who can know it. This is a challenge to all, implying the utter impossibility of it to any but to God alone. I the Lord search the heart, he knows the most inward thoughts, Revelation 2:23, I am he which searcheth the reins, and the heart, he knows them evidently and certainly, Hebrews 4:13, all things are naked and open before him with whom we have to do. Those secret thinkings and intendments which are hid from others, and which we ourselves cannot distinctly read, because of their secret intricacy or confusedness, yet the very inside and outside of them are uncased, cut up and anatomized by his eye, in all which expressions God is careful to reserve this to himself. I the Lord do it, or I am he, that searcheth, and signifies that none else, is able to do the like. Answer 2. Yet Satan can do much this way, for if we consider how he can come so near to our spirits, as to communicate his injections to us, and that he often entertains a dispute with us in this secret way of access that he hath to our thoughts. If we observe his arguings, his answers and replies to our refusals, so direct, so pertinent, so continued, we shall be constrained to grant, that he can do more this way than is commonly imagined. That I may explain this with a due respect to God's prerogative, of knowing the heart, I shall. Thanks.